Hello and happy Monday afternoon, evening.
Happy Monday to everyone.
Yeah. Have you been obsessing, as I haven't, on the Tory party leadership stuff?
Well, I mean, obsessing, I think, is slightly overburdening the word, but or the extent of my interest. But it has, as I think we can probably discuss, got interesting in some odd ways.
It's got revealing, hasn't it?
Revealing, exactly.
Yeah.
So let's have just to illustrate to listeners who haven't perhaps heard or have lives and haven't been following this irrelevance in Birmingham, actually why some of the things that are being said are rather alarming. And here's a clip of Robert Jenrick, who's the current bookie's favourite to be the next leader, talking about the balance between immigration and filling jobs in the UK.
Here we go.
I want to help those people into the dignity and the security of work. That is a better way for our country to conduct itself, rather than bringing in people from overseas who don't come with them with roads and hospital beds and homes.
And all of those things may be desirable, but would you be willing to see jobs go unfilled in order to get the numbers of people moving to this country to come down?
Well, I don't think that's going to happen, Laura, but I do think that this is an absolutely central challenge. So if you're asking me, would I prioritise this? Yes, I would.
So that to me is it's I mean, it's not particularly rhetorically powerful, but actually it's a bit of a moment.
Well, I mean, what he seems to be saying, no, let me rephrase that. What he is saying is I would be quite happy for this country to be objectively poorer economically as long as we don't have any of those filthy immigrants coming in.
He's talking for that. There's never actually been a real immigration cap by a Tory government. There have been talks of immigration targets and objectives. Cameron I want the tens of thousands. Jenrick, uniquely amongst all the four, there's Kemi Badenoch, Tom Tugendhat and James Cleverly, the other three, is talking about a hard cap of how many immigrants net a year you can have, and he's talking about tens of thousands, i.e. 100,000 a year. And so Laura Kunsberg in her show on Sunday asked the right question, which is, well, if there are, that's all very well, but what if there are huge numbers of vacancies in nursing or social care or whatever, or any other sector? It doesn't just have to be care. What are you willing to do? And Jenrick is saying, well, those jobs will have to go unfilled, tough, and as you say, we put the purity of, he wouldn't say bloodline or but
it does have that horrible,
kind of
vibe about
folkish sound to it, ahead of the prosperity of the country. And that's Jenrick has this sort of Guildford accountant's manner. But actually it's quite a moment.
He's a nasty. He is what Eddie Mair would describe as a nasty piece of work.
He is, and
Rwanda wasn't tough enough, was it?
Opportunistic.
Kids cartoons on immigration centres should have been painted over.
They were painted over as consequences of it.
Too much levity.
The man who, his agenda is really, red in tooth and claw in the bloody sense. He wants to. He's unequivocally, we must leave the European Convention on Human Rights. That'll really get them going in the on the doorstep, won't it? And he says, crucially, we must fight reform. Otherwise, reform, his words were, will grow and condemn us to obscurity.
And what's worth pointing out is that he is the favourite amongst MPs, isn't he? The MPs like him, don't they? They're scared of Kemi Badenoch,
he's
aren't they?
top amongst MPs. The Conservative Home latest poll, before her more recent remarks, which we might talk about next, had Kemi Badenoch still top amongst members. So the way it works is for readers with lives, listeners with lives, is that the parliamentary party whittles it down to two, and then the two finalists go to the Tory members to vote. Now, this is a system it's an insane system that was brought in by William Hague in 1998, and the reason he did it, and this is why Europe is always there with the Conservative Party, was because he knew it would be a fail-safe against there being a single currency friendly Tory leader, because the members would always vote against that. And here we are.
And also the final two aspect to it. It does seem that clip was on the Laura Kuenssberg show on Sunday. And it does seem that Laura Kuenssberg's production team have decided who the final two already are, because it was only Jenrick and Badenoch who made the cut.
Well, it was controversial, this, wasn't it? Because I think Tom Tugendhat's already been on Laura's show recently.
Yeah.
So the argument was, well, we've had him on and we'll have them on again. But it looked, you're right, that the optics of it was that they were selecting the top two.
Yeah.
The question now, just one more thing about Jenrick before we go on to Kemi, is that today, Monday, in a conversation with the Telegraph, Jenrick went full Trump by saying that there was a cover-up of immigrant crime levels. There are no figures to that effect, by the way. They're not collected. But he said, and I'm quoting, "The institutional cover-up of this data is a scandal." Now, that's pure bullshit. MAGA. It's bullshit and it's MAGA bullshit. So that's him. But,
and also, let me just weigh in one final thing, because I was reading through his Wikipedia entry, and I was struck by his chumminess with Richard Desmond, the media baron, and the absolutely insidious fact that Jenrick rushed through an application for massive property development on the Isle of Dogs with ahead of a deadline that, had Desmond missed that deadline, would have meant that Desmond had to pay 30 or 50 million quid to pay for social services and social housing and all of that business. So this be under no illusion, anybody.
This is what you're getting.
This guy is 100% Conservative with a capital C-O-N. He really is,
But no, totally. And then we swerve to even not further to the right, but into strange terrain with Kemi Badenoch, who got into all sorts of trouble yesterday in an interview with Times Radio, where she did. I mean, she rode back later, but she did say maternity pay was excessive. Here's the quote: "Maternity pay varies depending on who you work for, but statutory maternity pay is a function of tax. Tax comes from people who are working. We're taking from one group of people and giving it to another. This, in my view, is excessive." Now, since then, there's been a lot of... She didn't say that.
Oh, it was out of context.
No. I mean, she
misrepresentation.
She may regret saying it, but that's what she said.
Well, she said, what I thought was hilarious was she said in interview, because actually I have been paying a bit of attention today.
I know you have.
In fact, I was watching... Do you know what I did, dear readers, dear listeners, in the service of this podcast? I listened to this strange guy, Martin Daubney, on GB News, who he's a presenter, but he seems to actually have trouble talking.
That is above and beyond.
It's very odd. But anyway, he had Kemi Badenoch's show with Christopher Hope. Her dialogue with Christopher Hope of GB News was on at the time. And she said about the interview with Times Radio, she said, "Now, I don't think the journalist was trying to land a gotcha question, but, that's certainly how it's been taken elsewhere." Well, there was only one person who landed the gotcha element in that interview, and it was Kemi Badenoch.
It was a self-gotcha.
Absolute self-gotcha, which begs the question, I mean, is she in control of her thoughts? That's what came to me.
I think that you're on something there, which is, what are those? Where are those thoughts tending? Because you asked me a few weeks ago who I was most interested in, and I am and remain most interested by her, but not because I think she's necessarily good, and clearly on the basis of that she's not, but because there's a lack of filter and a sort of openness to say what's on her mind.
Shoots from the hip,
but it tells you a lot about where the Tory party is, because the members love her, and they've loved her for a long time. Yeah. And so what is she saying? I mean...
Matt, sorry, before you go in.
Sure.
And let's say it is interesting, and perhaps to their credit, that they love a black woman, despite the fact that that's an undeniable fact.
Yes,
and she would be the first black female leader of a major political party in the UK. That's a good thing.
And again, here we're into one of the, because things are always more nuanced than they look. Yeah. She is a culture warrior. And she said, and had said already in the course of the leadership contest, but she said on Laura Kuenssberg's show, some cultures are better than other. Not all cultures are as valid as some, right?
Another slightly sort of bad vibey statement.
It's not. That's not what a brat summer is made of, right? But what she's driving at there. I mean, first of all, let's say what it is. She's talking about Islam, right? She's not. She wouldn't say it, and Laura pressed her very hard, but she wouldn't say it. But that's what she meant. She was talking about, women who will answer the door and not talk to the person, but wait for the husbands and so on. It was quite clear that she was talking about Islam.
Yeah.
So she would distinguish between culture and ethnicity.
Yes.
And I think that this is where next gen conservatism is going to go. I think it will go hard on culture wars, and I think that it will go hard on. I'm not a fan of the word Islamophobia, because I think every religion, Christianity, Judaism, you should be subject to critical analysis. That's fine. I mean anti-Muslim racism.
Yes.
Right?
And that's what that is.
And this is where we're going. And that's going back to Boris Johnson's post box calling people in burqas, letterboxes and bank robbers,
watermelon smiles.
That's even further. But I mean, so we're going. Yeah. But this is the direction we're going into: anti-Muslim hatred. That Islamophobia doesn't do justice to what this is, because you can say, I have issues with Islam or I have issues with Christianity. That's not the point. This is not about blasphemy. Yeah. This is about people.
And you can certainly say I've got massive problems with Islamists
and
the Islamists who perpetrate terror
or any religion.
But to pick out the cultural values of a religion.
It's when you start talking about people.
And saying that your religious beliefs, which mean that you don't want to speak to strangers on your doorstep.
Right.
That makes you of less value.
Yeah.
And that's literally what she's saying. She's not implying that. She said that makes you of less value than somebody who does want to.
Obviously, that kind of statement makes the whole very delicate question of integration, how far should it go, all the more complicated. Because if your starting point is that some cultures are less valid than others, the prospects of negotiation between communities in a pluralist society diminishes accordingly. So
it's not even saying, as the French have said, which again I don't agree with, but this
laïcisation,
the insistence on secularization and the eradication of symbols that defy secular life. In other words, you can't wear your burqa in the street. Right? It's not saying that, presenting that as an argument that the secular society is better and worth it for everything. It's saying that actually, no, you are backwards.
It's about the most aggressive way of posing some questions that can be looked at quite benignly, which is we have freedom of worship in a pluralist society, quite rightly. But what happens when freedom of worship, collides with other things, and how do you deal with that? And these are very, very delicate issues to be had in a civilized way. Not saying on TV, your culture's less valid.
She's chosen to be racist when there is a progressive way of saying these are challenges that we can deal with. But she's framed it in a racist
you can't
fashion.
Drive a teacher in Batley into hiding.
Right, exactly.
That's you don't have to say anything about Muslims.
That guy's still in hiding.
Yes, I know. Yeah,
it's incredible.
But it makes it harder to resolve that issue when people like Badenoch say something as regressive as this. So there's that. But then the other thing which blew my mind was all four of the remaining candidates are arguing for a smaller state, and you have to kind of just think about that for a second. Look at what's happened to them. They had 365 seats before the election, right? And they now have 121.
Yeah.
Less than 5 years ago, they won with an 80-seat majority. And really what they're doing is just representing, I think it was Justin Greening on Politics Live today said, you're really just, all of you are just sort of lightly amending the last manifesto and hoping for the best. And she's absolutely right. Yeah. Political parties win power when they ask the right questions.
Yeah.
So Thatcher, love her or hate her, she asked the right questions. Blair asked the right questions. what are the right questions today?
Yeah.
They're not, how do we make the state smaller?
No.
How do we get out of the ECHR?
Yeah.
They are, how do we deal with the much greater burdens on healthcare and social care? What do we do about climate emergency? I mean, much in the midst of all this factional rowing over the Tories, today marked the end of the use of coal power planting, the closure of the last coal-powered plant in Ratcliffe-on-Soar in Nottinghamshire. Big day.
Massive day, yeah.
Digital revolution, growing defence costs, all of this require more government. Yeah. And so the debate is going to be the civilised debate, the sensible debate, what sort of government?
Yeah.
So we need a centre-right alternative to Labour that is saying, well, hold on, should we do this or should we do that? Not, we're going to make government smaller and sack half the civil service.
Yeah. No, totally.
Because that just leaves Labour on their own with the Lib Dems nudging them as a conscience. But that's not enough.
I agree completely. Well, who's your tip for who's going to emerge victorious amongst the
members?
Well,
I think that Kemi Badenoch was sort of my tip until this big sort of...
Until she decided to pick on women.
I mean, just not a great start.
It's actually quite weird, isn't it? Because if there was one constituency of people she had on side, it was the Mumsnet crowd.
Yes.
Right? Who were very kind of gender critical. And they were really... Because she'd been really super hyper gender critical. But then now she said, oh, by the way, that's me, but I'm going to take all your maternity pay.
I wouldn't be... Part of the problem is that the sample is so small. So it's 121 MPs. It's very hard to know how it might go. But I wouldn't be surprised if the MPs so contrived to keep her out of the
If there was a Stop Kemi campaign.
In which case Jenrick wins.
Yeah. Amazing. Well, great news for the covers of the New European, but lousy news for civilization.
I mean, just, the thought of Keir, God bless him, versus Jenrick, it doesn't set the pulse quickening, does it?
It doesn't. By the way, apropos nothing except the sense of mission that you were talking about, the sense of vision for the country. Have you seen the Sky documentary on Apollo 11?
Yes.
Oh my God!
It's
the hour
amazing,
and a half.
Isn't it? It's incredible.
I mean, no commentary, no voiceover, no nothing. All just original footage of the moonshot. It's one of the best documentaries I've ever seen in my life.
It is absolutely superb.
And it's and you watch it now, and it's unbelievable. But I mean, the reason I raise it is it ends very poignantly with Kennedy, but giving this great speech about. And I'd forgotten how funny Kennedy was.
Oh, yeah.
Where he's giving this big mission, and he makes this great gag in the middle of it where he says, and the capsule re-entering the Earth's atmosphere at temperatures of 25,000 centigrade, almost as hot as it is here today. And and the whole crowd laughs. And then he says, but we'll do this by the end of the decade. We'll land a man on the moon and bring him home safely. And you watch this. Listeners, if you haven't seen it...
Not because it is easy, but because it is
because
hard.
It is absolutely magnificent piece of television.
Back in Birmingham. We're going to get out of the ECHR. Yeah. Get out or die was what Jenrick said.
We'll
which
have to
I
listen
think
to Liz Truss's warnings.
Oh, my God.
About the future.
So shall we have a
short break
and then come back
to another giant of Tory... the Tory
a capsule re-entering the atmosphere.
Join us later, folks, which for what will, I guarantee, be an entertaining little section. See you in a minute. So Matt, he's back, isn't he?
He's back.
He's back.
I mean, was he ever really away? So Boris Johnson's memoirs imminent. I think they're published next week.
Unleashed.
And they've been unleashed.
Uncombed.
Yeah. Like, Kurt Cobain unplugged. And there's sort of been a flurry of... I mean, I once described Johnson as the love child of P.G. Wodehouse and Nietzsche. And I do think... I'm not even sure about Nietzsche anymore. It's just that the way he describes these incredibly serious issues in this Wodehouse...
It's just unbelievable stuff,
isn't it? I mean... this is the thing about, he's come around to the view that COVID came out of a lab in Wuhan. Okay, there are a lot of people who think that. But the way he says, some scientists were clearly splicing bits of virus together like the witches in Macbeth, eye of bat and toe of frog, and oops, the frisky little critter jumped out of the test tube and started replicating all over the world. Now, okay, that is funny, right? But he's describing, a pandemic that killed millions of people. Then his ludicrous claim, and this one I'm sure is just a lie, about the so-called aquatic raid.
This is just the best ever.
On a Dutch warehouse to seize COVID vaccines. I bet you that he thought that, didn't say it to anyone, and it never happened.
Well, but he's so. I digged into this and tried to get as much out of it as possible because it was bewildering. So, what he said to Lieutenant General Doug Chalmers, right, a man who served this nation for 37 years, and rose to the position of Deputy Chief of Staff, right, and has done tours in Iraq and everywhere you want, right, and this is what he had to tolerate, right. He said, "What we'll do is we'll get some boats, some ridgeable dinghies, and we'll sail them 100 miles off the coast
small
of
boats,
Lowestoft, some small boats, to Leiden, where these vaccines are." And then the plan was, and this is a quote, "They would rendezvous at the target, secure the hostage goods, exfiltrate using an articulated lorry, and make their way to the Channel ports."
Yeah.
Right. Presumably, at some point, someone said, "Well, why don't we just drive the lorry there then?"
Yes,
in the first place,
would be quite an easy way to do it
instead of going over by dinghy. Then Doug Chalmers says to him, "But Prime Minister, we would have to explain why we are invading a long-standing NATO ally." To which Johnson says, "You've got a point."
Invading the Netherlands is not really a good idea, I think.
What is he thinking?
He wasn't thinking, but also he's thinking like a sketch writer or like journalist.
What would Churchill do?
Kind of, but also
because Churchill had a fondness for batty ideas, didn't he?
He did, but he also won a war, which Johnson never did. A big one, you know. And I sort of think that the way he used to write columns was he would think of some sort of Woodhouseian conceit. Wouldn't it be an absolute rip-roaring?
Because he wrote for you when you were at the Spectator?
No. He was. I mean, although he did. Yeah. I mean, and I have to acknowledge, because I think you have to be fair and up front with it. He was, as a former editor. Yeah. He was exemplary.
Yes. He wasn't interfering.
Not in the slightest, and he was very helpful.
Because he's too fucking lazy. That's why.
No.
Too actually, lazy to be interfering.
Actually, to be fair, no. I mean, I think. As a journalist, I mean, look, he made up everything and all that. Yeah. But in the world of journalism, he was actually very happy. Yeah. And I don't think he was. My own personal view is he was never happy. As a politician.
It is a curious fact, isn't it, that journalism is a profession which encompasses people who literally couldn't get gainful employment in any other profession. But also it's such a ragtag bunch of people.
He invented. I mean, it is the extraordinary thing is that he had this bizarre sense of mission that he had to become prime minister, and so he dumped a career in journalism that would absolutely have made him editor of the Daily Telegraph, for what it's worth, and he became prime minister, which I guess is what he wanted to do. But did it make him happy? I don't think so. So where is he now? Well, this book is obviously I mean, what occurs to me about him now is that for a long time, up until about the time she died in 2013, Thatcher haunted the Tory party. Everything was compared to, and actually after she died, David Cameron said in an interview, "I'm not a Thatcherite," which at the time was quite, it doesn't seem like anything now, but at the time was cool, you know. But she loomed over the Conservative Party to an unhealthy extent. I think that Boris Johnson is going to loom over the Conservative Party for a very long time.
Do you? I mean, we're still talking about Thatcher now. What? How long is it since she left power?
But that's looming over Britain.
Yes.
Right. I'm talking about the Conservative Party.
Right. Okay.
Here, right.
Okay.
I mean, I don't necessarily think we'll all be talking about Boris Johnson in 10 years' time.
Right.
But I think the Conservative Party might be, and the reason is that Thatcher made them feel strong. Boris Johnson made them feel good.
Yeah.
right? And that's a very, very, it's a big narcotic in politics, that. And he kind of made them feel, I mean, his great thing, cakeism, you know, having a cake and eat it, or which is Orwell would have called doublethink. You know, it was like he made them feel that you could spend lots without taxing more, or you could have a pandemic lockdown, but you could still have lots of parties, you know, and you could leave the EU but still be a huge global power, and you could be a racist without being a racist. I mean, all these kind of ridiculous infantile positions. Yeah. But that was what made the Tory party under him feel good about itself.
Yes.
Plus, for a limited period of time, and there's no question about it, you know, he won a massive majority in 2019. He did have a sort of Heineken reach. Which dwindled quite quickly under the pressure of reality.
Of having to do something and work.
Well, you know, I mean, he was just not up to the job of running a country during a major pandemic. I mean, any more than Trump was. But you have to think, when we listen to Nadine Dorries, we just think, oh my God, you know, Jesus Christ. But that is actually what a lot of Tory members are like. Yeah. And for them, Boris is catnip. You know, he's a sort of hallucinogenic drug that puts them in a state of bliss.
Yes.
And so a lot of them now will be, particularly, you know, it's, of course, it's no accident that the book is being serialised. What's it? The Mail called it the memoir of the century, which I think may be a slight exaggeration. We'll wait to see. But it's coming out now.
I wonder how much they paid for it.
Oh, a lot. It's
always...
but
you know, I mean, the price of book serialisations has gone down massively. So, I mean, in the old days...
Yeah, but we're talking about it. That's the difference.
In the old days, the Daily Mail
lot,
would have paid, I think, and when I say the old days, I'm talking about, say, 25 years ago, would have paid £2 million for that serialisation. Yeah, it won't be anything like that. And it'll probably be 200,000, something like that.
Yes, because they already pay him close to $1 million anyway. But, you know, he'll do very... I mean, he's earning about 10 million a year at the moment.
Amazing.
So I don't know whether he's going to come back, but I don't really think that's the main point at the moment. I think that the main point from... If you look at it in a does any of this matter sort of way, and it sometimes... and frankly, a lot of the time, it's hard to think that any of it does. Yeah. I think his continued presence in the Tory bloodstream and in the Tory press, and, you know, the obsession of the Mail and the Telegraph with him, means that he will certainly hold back the Conservative Party from doing the top to toe rethink that it has to do. I am beginning to wonder whether it's capable of it, because so much of the problems that we face in this century are to do with, frankly, bigger government. And so embedded in the Conservative DNA, you know, is the idea of making government smaller. I'm not sure that it is salvageable. We'll see. Yeah. You know, we'll see. But it doesn't follow. Jeremy Hunt actually gave a speech today in the conference. You know, people remember, Jeremy Hunt is still Shadow Chancellor. You know, if the timetable sticks to what it is,
having astonishingly held his seat,
right,
which he wasn't expecting, was he?
Rishi Sunak will have to respond to Rachel Reeves's first budget, which is clearly crazy, you know, because the leader of the opposition does, and they won't have announced it until November the 2nd. I bet
you he just can't be arsed with any of this stuff.
Well, he turned up. I was disappointed because I was
6 minutes, wasn't he?
See, I thought he was going to give a really big kind of go for it, you know, which we would be able to pick apart malevolently, right? But unfortunately, it was just a sort of see ya kind of thing, wasn't it?
See you later, losers.
So.
You know, the guy who came out of it with and this is a man who starts at like -1 million in terms of credit rating, but has risen about 3 points in my book, was David Cameron. Who apparently said to Boris Johnson, according to Boris Johnson, I will fuck you up forever.
But he didn't, did he?
But he didn't. No.
He didn't really. Yeah. But the thing that Jeremy Hunt said today, which I thought was spot on, was don't assume that Labour's problems, which are very real, translate automatically into support for the Tory party, because they patently don't. Yeah, and it's the oldest error in the book for a party in opposition to think that the government's problems are automatically mean that it is going to be re-elected.
Well, the Tories ought to bear in mind that the government's current problems are being spoken about in relation to the Tory government's problems. It's not like, oh, they would never do that. It's like, oh, they're doing a bit of what they did.
No, there's no sort of comeback. It's more
also,
sort of...
like the reverse of the, oh my God, the honeymoon's over thinking is that this is still very early days, and actually the true test will become in a year or 2 years' time.
Long way down the line.
And it was interesting. I was listening to Alistair Campbell's podcast, and he was talking about Thatcher's early days, and that it took. I'm not comparing Starmer to Thatcher.
No,
but Thatcher had a very iffy, shaky start. Alex Ferguson had a very, very dodgy start at Manchester United before becoming the greatest manager the Premier League's ever seen. So stuff can turn around, lessons can be learned,
It's interesting. I mean, there's a great book recently out which recommended in the Culture newsletter, Ben McIntyre's book on the Iranian embassy siege.
Brilliant.
It's a great book, and one of the things it does is it reminds you of exactly the point you just made, Matt, which is that there was nothing inevitable about Thatcher's great supremacy. And that, as Ben shows in the book, the Iranian siege became part of this sort of compressed mythology that Thatcher had with the siege and the Falklands and then eventually the miners and the split of the SDP and Labour and so on, and really she had, we'll say it's luck, but some of it was luck actually. That you can never tell, and Starmer in 3 years' time could be very, very different to now. We don't know, but one thing I do know is that in 3 years' time, the Conservative Party is not going to be ready for government. No way.
No. Well, I noted that Kemi Badenoch's pitch is called Project 2049 or something.
I mean, look, the bigger question to ask in all of this is, and we keep saying it, but it's true, is reform going to take the place, not necessarily in 4 years' time, but 8, or I don't know. The pace is up for debate. But should we really be? Are we looking at the right party? Because I cannot see any fuel in the. In 1997, I could see fuel in the tank of the Conservative Party. They'd been smashed and destroyed, and Blair had completely trounced them. But there was still, you could see that there was a path back. It was going to take a long time, but there were people of stature. There was Ken Clarke and
John
Haig
Major.
in his own
John
way.
Major was, I suppose, ridiculed
Major had
at the
gone.
time.
Major had gone.
But as a
he wasn't Sunak.
Exactly. It's certainly not the opposite of that.
No, exactly.
Still a man of stature.
Heseltine was still around. And Portillo, and these were people who kind of might not be a cup of tea, but they were.
But they look now like giants.
Absolutely. And so I am not persuaded that if you look at all the variables inside the Conservative family, which is a damn small family at the moment, there is a path back, actually.
No, I agree.
There were lots of potential paths back in 1997, and in the end, it took them a long time, and they didn't get back in, without a coalition, and then it took them till 2015, and then they blew it all with Brexit, but that's another story.
I guess the only counter to that is that the enormous money-raising capabilities of that party would suggest that at some point professionalisation will kick in.
Maybe, except that money goes where it's best held, right? And if it's interesting, very quietly, Farage is professionalising reform, and I can imagine a situation, not necessarily imminently, where business thinks, well, actually, what's my best way of escaping Labour regulation?
Right.
Is it really, these clowns in the Tory party, or is it this rather, in the same way as, Jamie Dimon of JP Morgan Bank is backing Trump?
Yeah, people swing behind people who they think are going to win.
Look, we'll cut their taxes, not taxes, their taxes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And, make it easier for them to make lots of money.
Yeah.
And so we're not at that point yet. But the assumption, I think, that business, that money, big money, corporate money will always flood back to the Conservative Party.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Okay.
We'll
see. Interesting. The tide of history does turn, doesn't it?
It tends to.
What does that even mean?
Sometimes
the tide of history.
The time and tide. Time and tide.
Turns for nobody.
Oh, it changes.
What does it do?
I'm not really sure.
Right, enough.
Enough of this.
We've gone nuts. We're as mad as a Kemi Badenoch.
Yeah, exactly. Enough of your maternity pay.
Thank you so much for listening this evening, or this morning if you're listening to this on Tuesday morning, or whenever you're listening to it. Do subscribe to The New European, please. It will help us do more of this, and it's the right thing to do. If you enjoy what you're doing, listening to this for free, not subscribing, then do your bit for independent journalism. Go to theneweuropean.co.uk/2Matts. That's the number 2, MATTS. And we'll throw in one of our fantastic bollocks to Brexit passport covers, which you can hold and treasure and wave ostentatiously. Brandish as you're queuing this December for what I hear are going to be the worst immigration queues into the European Union in history as they introduce the new fingerprinting system.
It's another Brexit dividend.
Have something to talk about in that queue.
I don't know why you talk Brexit down so much. It's a winner.
Send in your feedback to 2Matts@tnepublishing.com. That's the number 2, MATTS @tnepublishing.com. Especially any questions you've got for us for our Sunday Q&A session.
Oh, please, yes.
Yeah, we love your questions. Even the nasty ones. Especially the nasty ones, actually.
Oh, yeah. No, I mean,
we love a challenge.
We love a sort of metaphorical pub fight.
Yeah. Thanks as ever to our producers at Rethink Audio, led by Matt Hill. And until Friday.
Have a great week.
Have a fantastic week.